What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Abigail, the latest horror movie from the filmmaking team of Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. I really sincerely hope I got one of their names correct, but previously I'd only seen their film Ready or Not, as well as some of their segments for the VHS anthologies. I guess it was VHS 94, 99, and 85, but they've already built up these huge filmographies in the horror genre. And for me, I'm always interested in directors where they decide to devote their entire career to one genre, like, what's his face? Mike Flanagan. He's done the same thing with all of his movies and shows, and it looks like these filmmakers are on the same trajectory. I did not see their two Scream movies, because even when Wes Craven was still alive, I was losing interest in the Scream franchise. I liked the first one quite a bit, saw it a million times. 2, less so. 3, much less so. 4, much less so. But I basically retired from Scream movies, so I've not seen their Scream movies. So if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to see this movie, I'll just say this. I think the movie's totally fine. It's totally harmless. It's neither good nor bad. This is not one of those horror movies like The Exorcist Believer, where I just fly into a blind rage, shrieking and screaming like a crazy person. But if your idea of a good time is an hour and 49 minutes of a little girl, dancing around doing her ballet moves, all while the Swan Lake soundtrack is blasting in the background, making jokes about playing with her food, etc. and so forth, with abundant quantities of gore. I would describe this movie as syrupy. It's not the kind of gore that's going to upset or disturb anybody. It's more or less there for comedic effect or just to make everything feel more extreme. But if you want to see a situation like that with a dash of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, a little Usual Suspects, and a little bit of the comedy Clue all thrown in for good measure, well then you will enjoy Abigail. I would describe my own feelings toward it as more or less indifferent. I've kind of got 3 modes when it comes to reacting to movies. I love them, I despise them, or I just kind of leave them alone. Although there were 2 third-act twists, which I did not see coming, where I was like, all right, y'all are at least trying to go above and beyond what is called for in this assignment. And as far as comparing Abigail to Ready or Not is concerned, I think Ready or Not is the superior movie. It feels a little bit more personal. Abigail feels like an assignment, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing a good job at just delivering a straight-up genre film. But the question is, who is this genre film for? And I guess if I were part of a row of 13-year-old kids going to the movies, if 13-year-old kids even go to the movies anymore, in the late 80s and early 90s, before we all had our driver's license, that was one of our favorite things to do. The parents would drop off the kids to the theater, we'd all go in, we could see whatever the hell we want, and then the parents would come back a few hours later. And a fine time was had by all. Whether or not that tradition is maintained or has withstood the test of time, I really have no idea, because I'm from a completely different generation. But when you're in that weird tweener spot between being a kid versus kind of a teenager that wants to see hard horror entertainment, I feel like Abigail is right in that sweet spot. And if you like the horror genre, I feel like everybody's journey is a little different, but they're 3 distinct phases, at least as far as I remember. There are those first few horror movies, which you see kind of almost by accident through an older sibling or through a parent or a babysitter, where they just wreck you, they just traumatize you. For me, those movies would have been Poltergeist, Cujo, seeing Ghost Story in the theater, Catching the Fog late night. Those movies, I won't even say I was a willing participant. I was just kind of traumatized by the experience. But then you get a little older, and you start watching horror movies with your siblings or on sleepovers, around age 9, 10, 11 years old, where you start kind of dangling your feet over the water. And some kids get really into it, and some kids just, they don't like it one bit. And I think Abigail's one of those movies that's going to be perfect for that second stage in the evolution of a horror fan, where you're ready for some gore and some violence, but you're not really ready for permanent, long-lasting damage to your psyche and to your emotions. You're not necessarily looking to develop any new emotional scar tissue. And those movies are out there, but I feel like that's for stage 3, when you're ready to become a horror movie historian or a connoisseur, where you're if it's a horror movie from any era in any country, as long as it's good, I want to see it. And speaking of classic horror movies, this movie is very loosely based on a 1936 horror movie, which I have not seen. Dracula's Daughter. I thought I'd seen most of the Dracula movies from the 1930s, but this one I've not yet seen. But the trailer, it doesn't look bad.
Look at me. What do you see in my eyes?
Death.
But maybe they were worried that by calling it Dracula's daughter that it might tie it into too many other horror movies or create too many different preconceived notions. They basically wanted this movie to be a standalone film, and that's totally fine. I get it. But everybody keeps asking, when's the first big horror movie of 2024 going to arrive? I feel like Late Night with the Devil was the first cool one, but what's going to be the first horror movie that generates massive box office? Because every year there's always that one movie which costs like $5 million or $10 million, and suddenly it grosses like $200 million. It's basically the stuff upon which Blumhouse built their empire and that sort of thing. And I don't think that movie's arrived yet, and I don't think Abigail is going to be the one. I think the best contender, it's going to be yet another vampire movie coming our way in December. When I was out at CinemaCon last week, I went to the Universal presentation. They showed a few clips from Robert Eggers' remake of Nosferatu. And I'm wearing the t-shirt for the Werner Herzog remake from the 70s, but obviously F.W. Murnau made the original back in 1922, and ordinarily I kind of, hold my nose when it comes to remakes, but I feel like if you give something 50 years, I'll probably give you a pass, or at least I gave Werner Herzog a pass, so I'll give Robert Eggers a shot as well. But the clips they showed, that might be like the breakout, smash hit of the holiday season. And obviously it's kind of weird counter-programming, having a weird, disturbing, hard R horror film come out right around the time when people are playing Jingle Bells and that sort of thing. But sign my ass up. I am fired up for Nosferatu. But let's talk about the horror film that we have in front of us and what it got right, what it didn't, and what kind of more or less is immediately forgettable. But here's the description from Wikipedia. Abigail is a 2024 American monster comedy horror film directed by those two filmmakers' names who I can't really pronounce. Screenplay written by Stephen Shields and Guy Busick. Based on a reimagining of the 1936 Universal classic monster film Dracula's Daughter, the film stars Alicia Weir as the eponymous daughter of Count Dracula, alongside Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Catherine Newton, Will Catlett, Kevin Durand, Angus Cloud, and Giancarlo Esposito. And they kind of nail it with their official premise. The film focuses on a group of kidnappers who capture and must watch over Abigail, the daughter of a powerful underworld figure from whom they demand a $50 million ransom. However, they soon get more than what they bargained for when they realize that they are trapped inside with no ordinary little girl. So let's start with the positive. I think the sets, like the production design, the locale in which it all unfolds, it's pretty goddamn cool. There's nothing better than a good old-fashioned, dark and spooky house with a lot of hidden chambers, with pools full of dead bodies or secret passageways or, rooms full of cobwebs, like just a chamber of horrors where basically over time, slowly but surely, people start getting picked off, eaten, ripped apart, etc. and so forth. So that was cool. The ensemble cast, some are stronger than others, but I think Dan Stevens kind of stole the show. He's just kind of leaning into it and having a really good time. It's funny. In both this, as well as in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, while I didn't necessarily like either movie all that much, I did like Dan Stevens quite a bit. So sign that sucker up for more work. He's got the chops. I think, while the world might have come to know him in the context of things like Downton Abbey, I first saw him in The Guest way back in 2014. I thought he was absolutely fantastic in that. As far as the rest of the cast goes, Angus Cloud, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. Sadly, he died at age 23. He does the exact same character, the exact same routine that people know from his work in Euphoria. I'll say he was fine, but nothing great, nothing to write home about. Giancarlo Esposito, same thing, we've all seen him do amazing work. I've been watching Giancarlo Esposito in movies since friggin' Trading Places 40 years ago. He's got a very long, cool filmography, a lot of which were I think his best movies were in the 1990s, where he was just hitting one home run after another. But he was obviously damn good in Breaking Bad as well. But at this point, it's we've got this part where we need somebody who's really kind of cool and has some dramatic gravitas. Can we get Giancarlo Esposito for a day or two? And it feels like that's exactly what it was. Just good old-fashioned work for hire. He was in, he was out, and he did what was expected of him. Catherine Newton, she better be careful because she's starting to fall into a category where it'd be very easily to typecast her moving forward, where Lisa Frankenstein was obviously kind of tailor-made to her tastes and sensibilities, but this feels a little bit like the role she played in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and I don't mean that in a flattering or complimentary way. I do think she's got chops, I do think she has talent, but I think more movies like Lisa Frankenstein and fewer movies like Abigail will definitely benefit her career long term. And this was my first exposure to actress Melissa Barrera, who I know starred in the last 2 Scream movies, hence her working with those same filmmakers again here. I thought she was pretty good in this. I would love to see her in some of her Spanish language movies. She got her start in Mexico before making the switch to American filmmaking. But I thought she more or less did exactly what was expected of her, but it's not some like home run breakout performance. Like I feel like Ready or Not back in 2019 did a really good job of putting Samara Weaving on a lot of people's radar, where I had never seen her prior to that, but I will be curious about Samara Weaving basically in anything she does moving forward because of Ready or Not. I mean, she was fantastic in that. I don't think that Abigail is going to provide like the same breakout opportunity to Barrera, but it sounds like she already had her breakout opportunity with Scream 5 and 6, and people love those movies. You know, it's one of those things where I have completely, totally moved on from the Scream franchise, but as long as they want to keep making them and people want to keep showing up, I feel like it's a classic no harm, no foul situation. If the fans are happy and the filmmakers are happy, who am I to judge? But yeah, Scream, all I need to know about Scream was all contained in Wes Craven's original movie, and that movie was fucking delightful, and yeah, a justifiable phenomenon when it first came out. But getting back to Abigail, this movie suffers from a problem that a lot of vampire movies have suffered from over the last 102 years. I don't know if there was an earlier vampire movie than Nosferatu. There was the show or the serial, The Vampires, which was about thieves and criminals, but there were no vampires. They were just called The Vampires. That was in the teens, but maybe Nosferatu's first. But I'm always hesitant to say anything is the first of anything, because anytime you say, oh, such and such was the first Shakespeare adaptation, or such and such was the first Western, there's always some historians like, actually. Anyway, Nosferatu is the earliest famous vampire movie, but going back to the beginning, they've always had a problem with actors speaking their lines when they got their fangs in, and it helped with Max Schreck and Nosferatu because it was a silent movie, so they could make them look totally ridiculous, and you weren't worrying about any of the dialogue. And I feel like Christopher Lee did a brilliant job of delivering his dialogue so beautifully. And then when they needed the big like vamp out moments, that's what they would do. They would put in the fangs and let them go nuts. But I always feel like it's a problem when you've got actors speaking when they've got too much crap in their mouth and it interferes with the performance. Give them spooky makeup, give them spooky ears, make them as spooky as you like. But when it comes time to speak, take the goddamn prosthetics out of their mouth and let them speak clearly. But as far as the action goes, I would say it's okay. I had one problem where toward the end of the movie, Abigail's in a situation where she actually has a challenge, and yet she's still doing all of her stupid ballerina dance moves. And I feel like if you're playing with your food and you know that their death is a foregone conclusion, by all means, do as many Swan Lake moves as you like, and I totally buy it. But if you're in a situation where you might die and you're getting your ass kicked, you're not going to still do like your silly choreography. You're just going to vamp out and rip someone's spinal cord out. So my suspension of disbelief was kind of destroyed by the over-reliance upon the choreography toward the end of it. But I will give them high marks for just going all in when it comes to gore, blood, dismemberment. I mean, it's not on the level of something like Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead, which if you want to see a movie that is syrupy, I can't think of a movie that is more syrupy than Dead Alive, especially if you want to talk about movies like in the comedy, horror, kind of hybrid genre, which is one of my favorite hybrid genres. I saw American Werewolf in London during that early first evolution phase where I was very impressionable, and I think I've been addicted to comedy horrors ever since, but the sad reality is there are not that many good ones. But Dead Alive, I don't even know if it qualifies as a comedy horror. It's got a lot of gore and zombies and monsters, but it never tries to be scary once, and I feel like a true comedy horror film should try to, at times, to be both scary as well as amusing, like An American Werewolf in London. But getting back to the question of whether or not people should go see this movie, I'll say if you are a young horror fan or if you are young at heart, and some people, they just don't want to go like that far to the dark side when they're watching a horror movie, and I get it. The horror genre is a big, giant umbrella with a million kinds of films to be enjoyed, and if you are a horror fan, watch whatever films you want to watch. If you like the rough stuff, if you want to actually be shocked, if you want to be traumatized, or if you want like some real visceral intensity, that is totally lacking from Abigail. I'd say Abigail is mildly amusing if you are a seasoned horror connoisseur. But if you're new to the genre and these actors and actresses are ones that you're interested in, by all means, go and have a good time. The movie's got a $28 million budget, so it's going to need to do relatively well in order to be a worthwhile investment. And also, I would love to see these directors continue to work in the horror genre, like I said at the beginning. I'm fascinated by directors who basically just decide, I'm going to devote my entire career to making spooky movies. And there are definitely directors out there where they've got like streaks where they will go all in. Like David Cronenberg from the mid-70s to the mid-80s, he went all in. And John Carpenter from the mid-70s to the late 80s, more or less, with a few exceptions like Starman, was all in. I think that's cool. Or Sam Raimi in his first few movies was all in. And then there are those directors who they make 1 or 2 horror movies, they establish their reputation, and they never look back. Sounds like these directors, they are lifers, and according to an article I saw a day or so ago, they've got the sequel to Ready or Not ready to go, but they don't have the budget yet. They don't have the green light. I think they've got Samara Weaving. I think they've got a script. But I guess it remains to be seen if Ready or Not is going to be coming our way, or Ready or Not 2 is going to be coming our way in the not-so-distant future. I enjoyed Ready or Not. I wouldn't say it was my favorite movie of 2019. 2019 was a really good year of filmmaking where there was just a very deep bench of incredibly powerful movies. So it's hard to stand out in a really strong year like that. But I'll be rooting for these filmmakers to sustain their successful track record. But I can't say with a straight face that Abigail is going to be one of those movies that people who like the really rough stuff, the really gross stuff, the really hardcore horror films, I can't say with a straight face that people like that are going to like Abigail. It's just going to seem too tame, too milquetoast, too vanilla. But if you've got a slumber party and you're in 7th grade and what should we watch? Abigail would be a perfect movie for that kind of occasion. I have a niece who's 11 who does not like horror movies at all. And if she was having a bunch of friends over and say, Uncle Jamie, what should we watch during our sleepover? Abigail would be absolutely perfect. So with that, I'm going to wrap this sucker up. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.